Proverbs 31, verses 25 through 31. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she smiles at the future. She opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household, and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and bless her, her husband also, and he praises her, saying, "Many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all." Charm is deceitful, and beauty is vain. But a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the product of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. There we go. I have sound. So good evening, everyone. I am here. So as you can see, Carly won't be here tonight. She's got a headache. So Bonita and Cindy, hello. And for the others who are tuning in. Right now we are good here in Florida. It should be rolling in at least the outer bands of it about 2:00 in the morning, which means I won't have sleep. So for those who don't live in Florida, just to give you guys an understanding of the hurricane process. So Florida, we do really well here, right? Because it's a natural occurrence. It's kind of like in California where you guys get earthquakes. So our governor, Ron DeSantis, is absolutely phenomenal. But just so you guys are aware, what they do when hurricane season starts, June 1, usually a couple of weeks before June 1, they prepare. And what I mean by that is, they cut the trees around the power line. So they're very organized here. It's kind of like Bonita, right? You live in the north. They prepare for big snowstorms. It's the same principle. But what happens is also the news makes everyone go into a panic. And we have a lot of new people here who have moved, and they're in a panic. So they buy everything and you can't get gas and food. So that's just my advice. If you're going to move to Florida, just calm down. Calm down. It's not like our first rodeo with a hurricane, but what happens is all of these people come together and they just panic. They buy bread and milk. And first of all, why are you buying milk? If you lose your power, the milk's going to go bad. So, I use wisdom. We've had, since I've lived here on the West Coast, but also these are getting so massively big that they're actually reaching inland, central Florida. So places like Orlando, Kissimmee, where I used to live in Ocala, those places are really getting bombarded. So as of right now, it's not breezy at all. It's a little light gust, but we also get that naturally here. It's called the Bay Breeze. So I'll know more tomorrow. Where, if you're looking at Florida, that's that long strip, as I'm sure you guys know, is called the Panhandle. But always right up in there is that Big Bend. That's that bend of Florida. And for some reason, these little guys just love to go up there. And so it's not going to turn. Now, she'll be Helena, I think her name is. Maybe like 90 to 100 miles away from Tampa. But the problem is where we live, not only do we have the Gulf, but Tampa also has the Bay. And then Tampa also has the Hillsborough River. I don't live in Tampa. My floods, I'm not even in an evacuation zone until they get to the letter D. So they go by letters here. And Tampa is always going to be an A, downtown Tampa. So we're good here, even though I am on the water, not the ocean. I'm not high rolling like that, on the bay, but I'm in zone D. So the storm surge would have to come up, I think, like 30 plus feet. So we're just going to play it by ear and see what happens. And just see, if we lose power, I already fill up my bathtub. So you have potable water. And if you unplug everything in the fridge will last for 24 hours. So I'm really not worried because Duke Energy is really good. So we have all of our systems in place. I appreciate everyone asking. But if we could just keep the people up in Big Bend, Tallahassee, all of that area where she is going to come in, what they're saying is a very high category 3 to a very low category 4. And as soon as, which I think it is now, as soon as she gets over Cuba, she's going to sit. You know, if anyone's been to the beach here in the summer, you know how warm the water gets in the Gulf. It's a lot warmer than the Atlantic. So once they feed on that water, it's just like fuel for her fire. So, you know, anything can happen. That's a long way before the eye reaches where it needs to be. So we're going to get outer bands. We're going to get wind. We're going to get rain. But just keep Big Bend, Florida, really in your prayers. That is where she is headed. We'll get definitely, I don't know, when I just looked at the update now, I guess around 15 maybe inches of rain. And they say Tampa. So again, I don't know how it's going to be here where I live. So storm surge, I'm not worried about it. But, you know, when the high tide comes in, depending on when this storm comes in, that can really decimate us here as well. So I appreciate it. But again, I'm good. I just don't panic, you know. And again, we have all these new people coming to Florida who just seem to really panic, and rightfully so. It's like if somebody moved up north and they experienced their first blizzard, they would probably be the same way. So, but our governor here, Ron DeSantis, I know he would never hear this, but he is phenomenal. We're a state that's used to it, and he is just amazing at getting everything organized and putting the right people in the right places. So, and we can attest to that from that big hellacious one that came through Fort Myers. They're already, you know, back on their feet again, so to speak. So he's great. And, you know, our line workers are great. The electric companies are great. We just live in a really great state. And I mean that seriously. You know, I've lived here since I was 16. I've been through many, many hurricanes. And I'll be honest, we really don't get that nervous unless it's like a Cat 4 and above. Because we get like we get a tropical storm to a category 1 like every afternoon at 4. So that's the way it is. But other than that, thank you guys again. Please go ahead and, you know, absolutely keep me in prayer here that we don't lose power, that this apartment complex, you know, stays together. There's no leaking, no shingles are lost, because the winds are going to kick up here. So we're looking at anywhere from 70 to 90 wind gusts. And I'm sure you guys may know how that is. I don't want to give like a hurricane lesson. Sustaining winds will probably be at 40 or 50. So common sense is it's sustaining. They're not ending. So for however long the storm is, you have those constant winds. And then every once in a while, you'll get that gust of wind. And that can range anywhere from 70 to 90 miles per hour. So right now, when it's supposed to hit the outer bands, our area, early in the morning, she's going to be a Cat 4 in the ocean. By the time she hits land at Big Bend, like I said, they're putting her right at a category 3. But I think she's going to be bigger than that. That's just my personal opinion. So Big Bend needs our prayers. Maybe it can shake up those in our capital in Tallahassee and knock out some of them Democrats and put them on their knees and repent. And some Republicans. Doesn't mean just because you're a Republican doesn't mean you're a Christian. So anyway, thank you. Hello to everyone. I see Mary Jo and Marie, of course, Cindy and Jules, Natasha, Bonita, I already said hello. So thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to end it out, though, tonight in the book of Ruth, and I'm pretty excited. This is going to end beautifully. I'm pretty certain we'll get through it. If not, we'll go into a third week, but I'm pretty confident in what's happening. So the book of Ruth, and someone had commented, I don't remember who it was, but I was right there with them. A lot of us as Gentiles, right? We might have skimmed past Ruth or maybe even the book of Esther, to be honest with you. Because we as Gentiles, right, we don't understand Jewish culture. We don't know what's happening there. But, and I will do my best to explain the remainder of Ruth the best that I can and in my deep dives. because Kim, personally, I wasn't sure about certain things, and I didn't want to confuse the text or just gloss over it because I didn't understand it. So, for instance, in verse 7, we read about an account from Ruth and her behavior with Boaz at night. And some of us may not understand that and what it means, or perhaps you think maybe Ruth was making advancements on Boaz in the middle of the night. So we left off last week, of course, in the book of Ruth, our kinsman redeemer. It's nothing to do with the rapture, and I'm going to talk about that quite a lot tonight. So we left off in verse 5 last week when Naomi, the once bitter old woman, is now becoming the exciting matchmaker for Ruth because she realizes her blessing through the kinsman redeemer. And she's telling Ruth, get all pretty and doll yourself up and meet Boaz on the threshing floor. So we talked about the threshing floor last week where she would meet him. So feel free to go back to last week's episode. So simply put, a threshing floor is where after they have brought in all the grain, both the edible and the inedible or unedible, however you say the word, they thresh it with these things that you see there, a flare. It's kind of like a sickle, and they separate the edible from the inedible. And then after they're done separating that from the threshing floor, the owner of the land would lay, just trying to give you a picture here, they would lay out on that threshing floor to protect the grain. And again, this is also a very big celebration because within the harvest, whether it be barley or wheat or whatever the harvest would be, they were able to store the excess and then also sell it. So this was also a celebration. So in verse 6, that's where we're going to pick it up here tonight, or actually verse 7, my bad. But in verse 6 is where we read that Ruth, she went down, she obeyed Naomi. Remember, Ruth is extremely faithful to her mother-in-law. And for those who may be just tuning in this week, Ruth obeyed her mother-in-law. Ruth left her own family, her own gods in Moab, to follow the God of Israel. So Ruth, in that, knew a lot of Israeli culture. So in verse 7, this from here on out, this story gets so beautiful. I really hope you guys stay with me here tonight, especially as women, single women. I might upset some of y'all tonight, but this is going to be a harsh message in a way for single women to hear. But when I was typing up these notes, I really felt led of the Lord to be frank and bold here this evening. So in verse 7 is where we read, when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, it doesn't mean he was drunk on the wine. Does that make sense? Eaten and drunk, not drunk on wine, but he was full, right? He went to go lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came secretly and uncovered his feet and lay down. So there's a lot of things here that we need to take in. First, Boaz was protecting that heap of grain. He just wasn't like, let me lay in this bed because it's comfortable. He was laying there because he needed to protect it. And then the thing here, where people might not understand culture as a Gentile, Ruth coming in secret is not some act of dishonesty, nor was Ruth uncovering his feet and laying down in some immoral way. So remember, and we're going to get to that here this evening, in verse 11, it's very clear, and I think that's in the passage for a reason, that Ruth was a woman of excellence. So just to put the uncovering of Boaz's feet in context. So just put yourself in Boaz's situation. If you're sleeping and someone were to uncover your feet, you would probably wake up because of the chill that hit your toes or your feet. That's what took place here. So Boaz would wake up and cover his feet back up. And when he did this, Ruth was lying at his feet. And what I thought about, certainly not some woman who wanted to get it on in the middle of the night. It was respect and it was culture. And we're going to get to that. But I was brought to the story of Mary and her alabaster box, her alabaster. So with her tears and her hair, right? She wiped Jesus's feet. And feet in the Jewish culture mean something. And we saw that when Jesus washed his disciples' feet to prove that he came as a servant. So the next verse here, when it says, it happened in the middle of the night that the man was startled and bent forward, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. So the question would be, well, why was he startled? So maybe again, the cool night air hit his feet. And we also read that he bent forward. So that motion, bending forward, perhaps, right? Because the text isn't really clear here. Something startled him. Was it the coolness on his feet? I'm thinking so, because then it tells you he bent forward. Why did he bend forward? Maybe to put the cover back on his feet. But there was Ruth lying at his feet. So then in verse 9, we will read that Boaz asked, "Who are you?" And Ruth responded. She responded with something she understood by Boaz from his previous blessing on her. So this might sound a little confusing right here, but remember, Ruth is a Moabitess who was now following the God of Israel. And in chapter 2, verse 2, we previously discussed about the wing of God. So we're going to get, I'm going back a little bit here. It might sound confusing to move forward to make the context make sense. So when he asked her, Ruth was remembering Boaz's previous blessing upon her. And that was in Ruth chapter 2, verse 12, if y'all may remember this. Boaz said to her, "May the Lord reward your work and your wages be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge." What's so beautiful about this story is she's literally asking the same thing now of Boaz. So that's why it wasn't perversion of Ruth laying at his feet. She's now saying, "Hey, you're my kinsman." And then here is where it gets beautiful, y'all. She says, "I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative." Now, for some, you may be like, I have no idea what any of that means. Neither did I. So what I wanted to do is I'm like, spread your covering. Like, I'm so confused, Lord. Like, they're not doing anything. There ain't no hanky-panky going on the threshing floor. So what does that mean? So I wanted to see what other versions had to say. Because sometimes the NASB, even though it is my favorite version, sometimes I do like to read other versions because sometimes the words are just too casual. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. So I want to read really quick the KJV first. And it says here, "And he said, 'Who art thou?' And she answered, 'I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman.'" And I'm not a fan of the NIV, but I do like how this one translates the best because it actually, believe it or not, lines up perfectly with the Greek word. So the NIV says, "Who are you?" he asked. "I am your servant Ruth," she said. "Spread the corner," notice I underline that, "of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family." So why I wanted to read both of those is both the KJV and the NIV, that word that we're reading here, the covering, the skirt, and the corner is the actual really great Greek interpretation. That word means kanap, which means wing. So Ruth knew, right? So I explained just previously that Ruth understood what Boaz was telling her about seeking refuge under the wing of God. And now she's asking Boaz for the same. It's like, "Boaz, would you bless me? Will you marry me as my kinsman redeemer? Bless me like the God of Israel has blessed me." And that's the typology in Ruth. It's so beautiful. Ruth was a Gentile, but bold enough to ask Boaz for this. Yes, did Naomi kind of push her into that? But Ruth clearly in the text willingly went. So she was asking him, would you secure me by this provision, by covering me with your wing, by becoming my kinsman redeemer? So what I loved about that, and this is really what I wrote, are we bold enough to come to our kinsman redeemer and ask him, hey, Lord, do you remember that promise in your word? Are we bold enough to come to him and ask for our petitions? And when we get to verse 10, right, it's even more assurance that God is our provider in the matters that we request. So my question to you is, while you're watching this right now, or you're watching it on post, are you lost? And what I mean by that is, are you not a believer in Jesus Christ? Is he not your kinsman redeemer? Are you not safe and secure under the wing of God? Do you want to be safe under the wing of God? Do you want to step out in bold faith and rest at the feet under the wing and the provision and the salvation of your kinsman redeemer? It's simple. Admit you're a sinner. Put your faith in the gospel that Jesus came, was born of a virgin, he died, he was buried, and he rose again. And you simply put your faith and trust in what Christ did and what he did alone. That is what your kinsman redeemer, the whole point of Ruth, is to cover you, hear me all, is to cover us, to make us his bride. The bride that he is soon to rapture, but I'm not bringing that in because Ruth has zero to do with the rapture. So that is what we see here. That is why what Ruth did was not immoral or disrespectful. She was obeying not only culture, but she understood God is my provider. I understand him, me, nestled under his wing. I actually have, I don't know if you can see behind me, right there. That is the one that says about under your wing, right? So that photo, again, somewhere right there. But that's what we do. We have to nestle ourselves under the wing of God. So Ruth knew at that moment that bowing, laying at the feet of Boaz, he would respond to that request. And that's what Jesus is doing. Are you bowing at the feet of our Savior? Are we asking him, Lord, protect me, bless me, provide, secure? And he's saying, yes, I will secure your future and your eternal hope. And once we have that, we have eternal security in our salvation, in our kinsman redeemer. So verses 10 through 13 is Boaz's response to what Ruth did. Again, another case to say what Ruth did was not some immoral behavior. So this is what he said. Then he said, may you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. So this is where I might upset a few people, I guess. But I wanted to speak really honestly here tonight. So I don't know why that's not getting off the screen. There we go. So when we read just that snippet, may you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. So again, remember the term my daughter was being used because of the age difference. So clearly Boaz was not embarrassed by what she did. And he was also a decent man who didn't take advantage of a younger woman at night. And he could have done that because no one would have seen. So this is where I wanted to digress. And again, it might upset some single ladies, but I have to really be honest here when it comes to Christian single women. And I want to make this very clear for professing Christian single ladies. If you are single and you are walk with the Lord, stop seeking after men who only want one thing. And they put you in a place where you will disobey God. Find your peace and your security in Christ alone, not a man. And I hate to say this, but a man will not make your life better or more fulfilled. If he leads you to the bedroom, he is not from God. I don't care. Hear me on that. I don't care what kind of label he says. He can go to church and he can be a good old Christian boy, but he's not if he's leading you to the bedroom. An honest, respectful man of God would never even dare to put you in a situation of temptation. If he's leading you into the bedroom and not into the Bible, why do you compromise? The other thing too is, I'm sure Ruth came to him modestly dressed. And we have to remember, Jesus sees. We as Christian women have got to be modest. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a modest woman. Now, I will be honest, I am very, very top heavy. You will never see these things. You won't even see them when I wear a bathing suit top. Why? Because first of all, I don't want to stumble where I don't belong, nor will I want the opposite sex to stumble where he doesn't belong. So I really have to ask that seriously. So this is, I am 100% when I say this. I was a deviant. I was a sexual, perverted, debased individual, addicted, which I can't say the word, it starts with a P, for an extremely long time. And I currently sitting here have been celibate proudly for many, many years with zero regret. And I always say, my gosh, if I can do that, coming from a world of complete perversion, so can you. But what happens is we ignore, again, I'm speaking to ladies who are truly born again, right? Because we all, once that sickle hits it, we're going to know who's a wheat and who's a tare. But I'm being serious when I say this. If you are a true woman of God, you're never going to put yourself in a situation and then ask, well, God, why didn't you bail me out? Well, because he told you in the Bible how many times not to put yourself in that situation. But you did it anyway, and then you get mad at God for not giving you a way out. That really bothers me, if I can be honest. God's way out is telling you not to date people like that. See, that's why Christians really don't date, if you think about it. Because temptation's going to be there. You would really know if your mate is really of the Lord, and things would kind of happen because God is in the middle of it. In case you don't realize, and I'm sure for any married person in the chat, marriage is a beautiful thing that God put between a man and a woman. Sex is to be beautiful between married people. Read the Song of Solomon. You can see how beautiful God wanted sex to be. But if you're single, I embrace my single life. I love my single life. God keeps me busy between my job and the podcast and writing the book and just life in general. I'm overflowing, and I mean that seriously, not in a boastful, prideful, ego way. Because I'm satisfied in my Savior that I don't need to be satisfied in sex. Because God is the only one who satisfies. And God is not in the relationship at all. Hear me on that. So you can't pray for something when God is not even in it. I told you I'd upset people tonight. I have a tendency to do that. So Boaz is a man of character. Even when he could have taken advantage of a woman at night, he respected her and blessed her. Ladies, again, not for live stream. This could be for post. I'm just saying when the Lord leads me to say something, it might not be for you watching. It could be for someone watching a week from now, a month from now. Men don't respect you when you give up the goods. I know that's hard to hear, but they don't. And then they walk away, they break up with you, they don't talk to you. You could be dating them for 6, 7 months, even a year. And then as soon as you give it up, everything changes. Well, why is that? Because they honestly don't respect you. A man will play the field until the man gets what the man wants. And I have to say this. If you are a Christian woman, a professing believer, you should never date unequally yoked, ever. If he truly is a man of God and he puts you in a place to disobey God, you need to run. And let me just say this and then I'll move on. A godly woman would never, hear me, would never invite a man back to her place. A godly man would never, hear me, never invite a female back to his place. So that's the way out. So when you invite yourselves into a situation where you're not seeking a Boaz, but you're seeking your flesh, God is not visible in that situation, y'all. I really want to make myself very clear on this. Now, for the unbelieving ladies, those who are not a Christian, give them something to be desired. We live in a day and age where it's like, oh my gosh, Kim, you've been celibate? Yes, and I'm very happy that I'm celibate. It's been the best time of my life. We live in a culture and a day and age where to hold on to your innocence is a taboo, or to dress scantily, to let it all hang out and give guys nothing left to the imagination. It seems okay, but it's not okay. I strive to be a Ruth. I strive to make sure that should the Lord, should his will, if he puts a man in my life, I hope that he is a Boaz. That if, which would never happen, but if I laid at his feet at night, he would literally not touch me. And again, for the unbelieving woman, dress modest, hold your head up high. Stop thinking you have to be something when you really don't have to be. So if you're young watching this and you just happen to find this video, you don't have to be what the world says you have to be. Of course, your worth, for the unbeliever, I would prefer that you get saved and follow Christ and all this stuff wouldn't matter. But I'm telling you, you don't have to succumb to the pressures of the world. You don't. You don't have to dress a certain way, look a certain... I embrace my gray hair. I'm embracing 52. I'm embracing a life change that I'm going through. I'm not going to sit in the mully grubs in my age and say, oh my gosh, I'm getting so old. Yes, I embrace my flaws, because in my flaws, people know that I'm real. That's what I want to be. Absolutely want to be. So anyway, I didn't mean to digress on that, but I really felt led of the Lord when I was reading that in the middle of the night, here was this older man. We don't know what Ruth looked like. We have no idea. Was she pretty, ugly? The text does not say. Fat, skinny, and that just proves to you it doesn't matter. A man is going to love you regardless. You ever know in the Bible when we've been reading these stories, they describe Sarah was this and Rachel was this and Leah didn't look good, but Rachel did. So they're giving you a description, but I found it fascinating in this story. They never give you a description of Ruth. And why is that? Because Boaz genuinely loved who she was inside. Not on the outside, because the outside means nothing, guys. We're all going to get old. Everything's going to start to sag. Doesn't matter how much I work out. I'm going to look old. My chin, I'm going to start I'm just going to start getting a little goblet here, maybe jowls. But I want to grow old. If the Lord were to tarry and send me a mate, we're going to grow old together and embrace the beauty of growing old together. That's not even in my notes. I'm just saying I literally ended it for the unbeliever, in case you're wondering. But let's just embrace who we are, ladies. Let's be a Ruth. Please. It's my biggest frustration is when I hear ladies who walk with the Lord having sex with men. It is, I bite my tongue on just all the time. I'm tired of hearing it because we have to do better. So hold on, guys, because we're getting, it's zone A. I was just getting a emergency extreme. I just had to make sure it wasn't my zone. But anyway, so that's not a good thing, if I can just say, if y'all, let me just digress there for a moment. So zone A, they have been mandatory evacuated. So I guess they're expecting, because that would be storm surge. So pray for those in those zones, which is really weird. Actually, right next to me is zone A, but we're zone D. And then to the left of me is zone C. So I don't know how the bay works, but clearly I'm right where the Lord wants me to be. So I didn't mean to digress in that. I'm just being serious. As women of God, we have to do better. And me, Kim, the ex, whatever, if I can remain celibate and not put myself in my whole goal is I just want to honor the Lord. So you can call me lordship. You can say that I'm salvation by works. Good. I'll take it. I want the Lord of my life. I want to make sure I'm obedient to him. I'll be honest with this. I went over to a friend's house last night. I was telling her a story about something, and the A word came out of my mouth when I was telling the story, ASS. And I was like I heard it in my head, and I was like, oh my gosh. But even on something like that, I heard it, and I was like, oh, I can't believe I said that. So even something, I want to make sure that things like that don't happen, right? And I'm not saying that in some boastful manner. Guys, hear me on that. I want to please my Savior in everything I do and everything I say, which is never going to happen because I'm going to fail him every day. But I'm also not going to sit here and put on a pretense like I'm some super spiritual person because I'm just so perfect. And I'm not. I just strive. I want to be closer to the Lord every single day. I want to make sure that women, and I had a really good friend of mine a long time ago, and I remember she was always telling me the story, and then her boyfriend would come over, and she'd be like, but it just happened. Well, why is he in your house in the first place? I would just want to, and she was a lot younger than me, so I felt like the Lord led her into my life. I mentored her for 5 years, and it was just the same situation all the time. Because you put yourself in that situation. So ladies, let's be a Ruth if we're single. There's nothing wrong with being modest and pure. Nothing. Let's not settle for second best, right? God will send you the perfect person. But sometimes we just have to wait. Anyway. So I was just seeing if there's any comment or questions. I don't see any. Just make sure if you do have a question for me tonight, because Carly's not here, that you put question all in caps so it pulls out to me. All right, let me get back to Ruth here. So let me reread verse 10. So it says here, then he said, may you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first by not going after young men, whether poor or rich. So I'm going to leave that verse up. So the first kindness that Boaz was referring to, if you remember in the story, when we read previously, when Boaz found out, he asked about Ruth, and that's when they found out that she was taking care of Naomi. So the next part, which he says here, going after young men, whether rich or poor, he was saying here, basically in layman's terms, is, man, you could have gone after someone so much younger to achieve what you needed. But you went after this older man. But Boaz also knew that Ruth was not with him for his wealth. Boaz knew that Ruth understood the role of the kinsman redeemer. And to do that, right, she was being loyal to her late husband. Because remember, Naomi was married to Elimelech. And then we're going to get to it, so I don't want to jump ahead. But it was at that point that the blessing then would go to his son who was married to Ruth. And we're going to get there. So again, I don't want to jump ahead. So verse 11, this is what I was talking to you about when she was laying at the feet of Boaz. So it says here, now my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you whatever you ask. For all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence. So a woman of immorality, he didn't say that. She was a woman of excellence. So she didn't lay at his feet to be immoral with him in the middle of the night. And it also proves that he encouraged what she did. And he was feeling good with this conversation. But unfortunately, a wrench was thrown into this wonderful plan. And we get here for verses 12 and 13. So it says, Boaz says, now is it true I'm a close relative? However, this is the wrench, there is a relative closer than I. Remain this night, and when morning comes, if he will redeem you, good, let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning. And what's beautiful about that verse there is Boaz protected her. I mean, he could have said, hey, Ruth, listen, just go about your way. Just leave here in the middle of the night. Go back into town, and we'll pick this conversation up in the morning. But he didn't. Why didn't he? Because he knew that if she left late at night, she wouldn't be safe on our journey. So again, Boaz, if you read it, and we're going to get to this is how beautiful this story ends. There's so much of who God is in this story. So in the next couple of verses, Boaz again was protecting Ruth from nosy Nellies. You know, the gossips who always seem to make up something that's not even there, but they're assuming something. So therefore they're like, oh yeah, that's what. Did you see Kim there last night? But I wasn't there. Like if they saw Ruth there late at night, they would assume that something happened. Even though nothing happens, rumors spread. So she lay at his feet until morning and rose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. Verse 15 is Boaz yet again giving her and Naomi provision. Again, he said, give me the cloak, another word for shawl, that is on you, and hold it. And she held it. And he measured 6 measures of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. So the cloak, like I said, is probably a shawl that she was wearing. And then we read next that in this excitement, right? I'm not going to put the verses up. When she came home to the mother-in-law, Naomi was all excited. How did it go? How did it go? You can just see the happy mother asking, oh my gosh, did my setting up work? What happened? Like that excitement. How did it go, my daughter? Like that's how you need to read that text. Like it's excitement there. And she told her all the man that had done. And she said, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said, do not go to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then she said, wait, my daughter, until you know how the matter turns out. Talking about the matter of the other kinsman redeemer. For the man will not rest until he has settled it today. So that phrase right there, for the man will not rest until he has settled it today. Clearly, Boaz is a get up and get it done kind of a man. A man's man, if you will. I know a man that I would like, right? Get it done. Get her done. He will not rest. Meaning Boaz was all about getting Ruth to be his. So to set up the context of the next several verses that I will read, I just wanted to give us a little understanding of the culture that we're going to read. So the town gate, I'm sure if you guys have ever read the Old Testament, you can read a lot about the gate. There was a gate in Jericho. There's a gate in Bethlehem. This is where business was handled. So if there was a business affair or a deal to be made, this is where you would go, to the town gate. The kinsman redeemer, that was a closer relative to Elimelech, arrived at the gate. The elders that we're going to read about are those who would witness what was being said. So as a conversation went on, a deal went on, a business making, there were elders around to be a witness. So in the verse, you're going to see the number 10, and I'm here to tell you the number 10 means absolutely nothing. As far as in the context, it's just a number. However, historical fact that I found out, the number 10 centuries later was the number used for a blessing on a Jewish marriage. So 10 people would gather when they go to bless a Jewish marriage in the synagogue. So remember, the role of a kinsman redeemer was to redeem. So I wanted to give you a little context. I'm going to read now what took place at the gate. This is the wrench in the story. Okay. And you can just also see Boaz being respectful of the kinsman redeemer, the line that he has to go through, right? He just didn't jump in and take Ruth. He had to do what was right by their culture. Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down, and behold, the close relative of whom Boaz spoke was passing by. So he said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned aside and sat down. He took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. Then he said to the closest relative, "Naomi, who has come back from the land of Moab, has to sell the piece of land which belonged to our brother Abimelech. So I thought to inform you, saying, buy it before those who are sitting here and before the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if not, tell me, and I may know. For there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am after you." So Boaz is clearly setting the scene. If you don't want it, I'm taking it. And then the other person, not Boaz, so the other relative said, "I'll redeem it." Then Boaz said, "On the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of the deceased, in order to raise up the name of the deceased of his inheritance." So just to give you a little bit more understanding here, Boaz was talking to the nearest relative who was first to redeem the property. He was all in. Remember, we read it where he was like, "Oh, yeah, sure, I'll redeem it." Until he had to redeem the land also. And with God's providential blessing back on Naomi and Abimelech, the property to be redeemed fell upon, I probably can't say his son's name, Mahlon. That's the one that married Ruth. So this is where we know which son Ruth married, Mahlon. Therefore, Ruth would have to be redeemed along with the property, since it was passed down to Abimelech's son, Mahlon. Ruth is the widow. So now it's saying here, we're going to get into it. So I wanted to set that backdrop, right? So, okay, yeah, I'll take the land. But in order to take the land, you must also take Ruth. This is where the little wrench came in, and the guy was like, I can't redeem it for myself because I would jeopardize my own inheritance. Redeem it for yourself. You may have my right of redemption, for I cannot redeem it. So basically, that closest relative in what we just read is saying, I'm not sure this will work due to my own property. I'll pass and you can have it. I put a little Kim spin on that, like a little English spin. So he's like, nah, I'm good. Nah, you can take Ruth on the property. I'm not going to jeopardize my own stuff for the sake of this. So now it goes into this, verse 7. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning the redemption and the exchange of land to confirm any matter. A man removed his sandal and gave it to another, and this was the manner of attestation in Israel. This is verses 8 through 10. So the closest relative said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses today, and I have bought from the land that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Abimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Moreover, I have acquired Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon. That's how we know who she was married to be my wife in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance, so that the name of the deceased will not be cut off from his brothers or from the court of his birthplace. You are witnesses today. Verses 11 and 12, and we're going to be bringing this in for a landing here. All the people who were in court and the elders said, we are witnesses. This is a beautiful part in this story. May the Lord make the woman who was coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built the house of Israel, and may you achieve wealth in Ephrath and become famous in Bethlehem. Moreover, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, through the offspring which the Lord will give you by this young woman. So there's a lot to take in there. Let me just break that down. When they mentioned Rachel and Leah, it was due to their fertility. Because remember, at this time in the account, Ruth is currently barren. She didn't have any kids. And clearly she was with him for 10 years, and she never had a child. So that's why they said that. Let her be blessed like Rachel and Leah. They also poured out a blessing on Boaz, that his wealth and his name would be increased and known in Bethlehem. Remember, Ephrath, whatever how you say that name, is just another name for Bethlehem. Why they said it in both ways, I don't know. Listen, I'm not the one who wrote the Bible. So why it's unclear why they mentioned Perez and Tamar. However, a little deeper dive would maybe give a little clarity, but it's still unclear why they mentioned them. Perez's descendants settled in Bethlehem. And the story of Tamar, some of you guys would remember that. It was when, I'm not going to get into it because I know YouTube will probably give me a strike if I say it because it's a bad word. When they were having intercourse, so Tamar and her husband, he would not do what a man needs to do to impregnate a woman. Instead, he threw it on the ground. You guys feeling me on that? It's the story in the Bible. So that's when Tamar dressed up. Maybe this is sounding familiar. That's when she dressed up as a harlot, went into the city. She deceived Judah, by lying down with her. And she gave birth, hear me, to Perez and Zerah. So see how we get Perez and Tamar in the story here. So Perez is the son of Tamar. When the elders at the gate of Bethlehem witnessed the transaction of Ruth marrying Boaz, they blessed the union. So the reason maybe they brought up Tamar, and this is a maybe, is Tamar went about it the wrong way. She got impregnated by deception. Ruth, because she's a woman of excellence, went about it in the right way. Make sense? I hope so. But biblically, God's providential plan using the will of man always comes full circle. Without, hear me on this, guys, without Tamar giving birth to Perez and Obed, who's going to come from Ruth and Boaz, the line of Judah to David would have been broken. Let me repeat that. Tamar birthed Perez. Without Tamar doing it dishonestly, it's amazing the people God uses in the Bible. Say she didn't sleep with Judah, Perez would have never been born. Ruth and Boaz would have never met. So Perez and Obed, we'll read in the genealogy when we end, is the father of who? Jesse. Jesse is the father of who? David. So without those two present, literally the lineage from Judah to David would have been broken. That is the big takeaway of God foreshadowing in so many places in the Bible. Hear me on this, please, about grafting in the Gentile. This is us in Ruth. O Gentile, we are grafted in. We have not been replaced. We did not replace Israel. We are grafted in. And this is just another beautiful encounter of that grafting in the vine. Remember, Esther, she married a Gentile. Ruth was a Gentile. And in the line of David, if you read about the Gentiles, so Gentile lives matter. I don't know, maybe that should be a hashtag, Gentile lives matter. So, and they're also, some of the stories that we've read so far, the only one we haven't gotten to is Bathsheba, but these non-Jewish women are mentioned in Matthew. Tamar. We all know about Tamar now, right? Her husband wasn't doing what he should have done, so she dressed up like a harlot, deceived Judah, and got pregnant. We know about Rahab. Rahab was the harlot who protected and then became an Israelite, Gentile. And then here we are on Ruth. We all know the story of Ruth now. And then finally there was Bathsheba. Bathsheba she had to have been a Hittite, if you think about that, right? Because Tamar and Rahab were from Canaan. Ruth was from Moab. And again, Bathsheba was married to Uriah, who was a Hittite. Chances are she was a Hittite. So who did she birth after they lost their baby because they had an affair? And by the way, please stop calling David a murderer. David was not a murderer. He was an accomplice to murder. I see so many people post memes about David being a murderer, and it drives me bonkers because I'm like, clearly you never read the story. David did not murder Bathsheba's husband. He purposely put him on the front lines to be murdered. That would be an accomplice to murder. I'm not smart, but I can read. And as we know, Bathsheba, after the death of that baby, who's her son? Solomon. Don't you just love when the Bible connects dots and uses us Gentiles, because Gentile lives matter. So anyway, so to conclude this account of Ruth, this is going to be a pretty long one here. So Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive. And she gave birth to a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord, who has not left you without a redeemer today. And may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you a restorer of life and a sustainer of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons," that's culture related, "has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her lap, and he became his nurse. And became his nurse. The neighbor woman gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." So they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. So Obed, that means worshiper. So remember Naomi, when we read her account several weeks ago, she started off joyful. And then she lost her husband. She lost her 2 sons. Rightfully so, right? She became a bitter old woman. She was full on the journey, but came back empty. So much so that when she got back to town, to Bethlehem, the ladies were like, "Dang, is that Naomi? Like, is that our Naomi? Because that don't look like Naomi." So now she is full, and she's no longer bitter. Now these are the generations of Perez. Why would they start with that name? Because it means something. God, in our sinful, fallen nature, by using our free will, will always use us for his providential plan. So to Perez was born Hezron, and to Hezron was born Ram, or Ram. To Ram, Aminadab, and to Aminadab was born Nahshon, and to Nahshon, Salmon, and to Salmon was born Boaz, and to Boaz, Obed, and to Obed was born Jesse, and to Jesse, David. So I want to go on record, and I want to be very clear that there is absolutely no rapture in the book of Ruth. And I'm going to be a little firm here when I say this. If you are too busy reading the rapture in this book, you're not busy about the kinsman redeemer, right? You're taking away what Christ will do, or has done, of course, because he did it, but future. And you're putting in something, right? I understand we're all excited about the rapture, but the rapture is great, but it is not more important than salvation. Christ didn't come for us to be raptured. That's just our blessed hope. He came to save. The rapture doesn't give you salvation. So I get really concerned about people who want to put the rapture in Ruth all the time. Let's keep our focus on him. So to end here tonight, because this channel is always about God and God alone, the names of God are so evident in this book. Hence the reason you cannot find rapture anywhere. Some of the names of God that were used quite often, Yahweh, or it might be Lord, right, in our books today, Elohim, and Almighty are used. So again, we don't see God's names. We don't see rapture. We don't see fly away, caught up. The idea of grace is woven into the story. And it's of God's providence and his favor. God's character is seen and known. He answers prayers, he blesses, and he protects. The word redeem and not rapture, hear me on that. The word redeem is used 20 times in the book of Ruth. So in that context, that word redeem, we read it in the form of kinsman redeemer, redeemer, redeemed, or redeem. Therefore, it's a redemption story, not a rapture story, and that needs to be the focal point of Ruth. The other word that many overlook is God's loyalty to his own. God, like Boaz, goes over and beyond for his children. He is faithful in dealing with us. He is faithful in dealing with me, even when I don't get the answer that I want. He's always there meeting the needs of his children. Are you his true child today? Because of this, Ruth also reminds us, and I mentioned this the very first week, that we need to be about our Father's business. What are we doing in our daily lives, our daily living for God? We are beneficiaries of his grace. And what are we doing with that? We should always be responding to God in faithfulness and obedience. Why? Because of his grace towards us. It's the least that we can do, right? God has extended grace and mercy on us, and we just want to disrespect him. And that's not lordship. That's sonship. I want to please my Father. What child, as even us, as we were children, what child today does not desire to please their parents? So if I'm lordship, so be it. I wear it proudly. To say that Jesus is my everything and the Lord of my life. Absolutely. Sure. So again, Ruth is not about the rapture. There are 0 illustrations in this book. It's about our kinsman redeemer, Jesus, the Messiah, the Christ, the soon and coming King, the Lion of Judah. Without that genealogy, without Obed being born from a Gentile and a Jew, our Savior would have never been born. Boaz represented the same grace by redeeming Ruth. It's the same typology of what Jesus did by laying down his own life and giving himself as a ransom, as the redeemer for a sinful and wicked mankind. Christ provided redemption for all of us. And guys, you wonder why I get a little under the collar when it comes to people putting the rapture in this book, because the rapture is not in it. And if you're reading the rapture in Ruth, I'm kind of concerned because Jesus is not your focal point. So anyway, with that being said, I do not see, I agree, Terry. Boaz was a man of excellence too. Absolutely. Yep. I agree. So I do not see any questions. I'm scrolling pretty fast. So if I miss a question, so let's see. So Carly, Rise Up Unafraid, is not here tonight. She has a headache. So anyway, so Rise Up Unafraid, I just saw this here as well. So power will stay on. Are you guys losing power, or I guess I saw someone else saying that they had a storm or something like that. I don't even know. All right, so listen. That's it. We have completed Ruth. And we'll find out. Oh, I need to take that. We'll find out who is going to be on tap for next week, Lord willing. And this Friday, I really have no idea what I'm going to be talking on yet. So anyway, I'm going to bring in my patio stuff and check up updates on this wonderful storm and see where we are at. And again, keep us in your prayers here in Florida. Big Ben is where the eye of the storm will be hitting tomorrow, Thursday, early in the morning, like Friday, early. So let's pray for them, and let's just pray that it doesn't turn, it just kind of stays where it's going. Not that it would really shift and hit us. It would be a hard ride if it did. But anyway, God is in control, and he will keep us all safe. So Tina, are you in Florida? Because you said your state is under a state of emergency now due to this hurricane. So I'm assuming you're in Florida, I would assume. I love you too, Cindy, and I love the Bible as well. God is good. God is good. So I'll wait for Tina's response. I'm assuming you must be in Florida. Yeah, it is pretty massive. I'll tell you that much. It is a pretty big storm for sure, but I have my thing. I do believe in cloud seeding. I believe there's a weather modification. This is like my favorite. I use it at work all the time. This is the gift that was given. I love it. Oh my gosh, that is so true, Tina. Tell Kat Kerr to keep her weather stick away from Florida. I did an RLE on her when that thing came through Orlando, and she was like, "See, no wind." And then she was hiding in her basement when the hurricane came. But anyway, I'm assuming that you're in Florida. So, all right, y'all, just keep us in your prayer. Like I said, I'm going to go clear my balcony. Thanks for hanging with me tonight, as always. I love you guys. And Lord willing, if I'm not blown away like Toto, I will see everyone here on Friday. So I'm just going to hit the end stream and kind of wave out and look like I'm in a parade. Hi. Okay. Bye. Love you guys until I see you here, there.